The stars do not weep, they burn in silence, patient and eternal, watching as empires rise from dust and collapse back into it. They witness the first words spoken by newborn minds and the last gasps of civilizations grown too proud to remember they were ever small. The galaxy turns, indifferent to triumph or tragedy, marking time in the slow dance of light and gravity that predates thought itself. Caelorn Velthratus had seen 12,000 cycles of his homeworld's orbit. By human reckoning, that was nearly 8,000 years. He had stood on the crystal spires of Veltharan when they sang the Ascendancy's first hymn to the void. He had watched colonies spread like silver seeds across 100 systems. He had believed, as all his people had believed, that the Velothi were the architects of order in a chaotic universe, the shepherds of lesser species, the eternal custodians of civilization itself. Now, he stood in the observation chamber of the last carrier group, watching stars he had named in his youth, and wondered if any Velothi would live long enough to see them again. The chamber was dim. Most systems were running on minimal power. Through the crystalline viewport, the debris field of what had been the Third Defense Fleet drifted in the darkness, fragments of ships that had defended Velothi space for 4 millennia, now reduced to silent metal and frozen atmosphere. Somewhere among those ruins were the remains of his daughter's flagship. He had not recovered the body. There had not been time. Behind him, the door whispered open. He did not turn. "High Consul?" The voice was young, too young to carry the weight it now bore. "Ensign Theris, one of the few surviving officers from the Academy fleet. We've received responses to the distress beacon." Caelorn's secondary heart, the one that regulated his emotional equilibrium, stuttered. Hope was a dangerous thing now. How many? "None from the Galactic Council species, sir. The Torveni, Sisharim, and Krell have all confirmed they cannot spare forces. The Ascending Harmony expressed sympathies." Theris's voice carried a bitterness that made Caelorn feel ancient. "The Harmonics said they are consolidating their own borders." Of course they were. The Krinthax expansion had shattered the old alliances like glass. 37 Velothi worlds had fallen in the last solar cycle alone. Fleet Marshal Corthan had burned his own flagship rather than let it be taken, along with 17,000 souls aboard. The Galactic Council, that assembly of elder species that had governed known space for 20,000 years, had fractured. Every civilization now thought only of survival. "So, we die alone," Caelorn said quietly. It was not a question.
Theris hesitated. "There was one response, sir." Caelorn finally turned. The ensign's crest feathers were dulled from stress. Her chromatic scales faded to near gray. She looked like she had aged a century in the last year. They all did. From whom?
"The humans." The word hung in the air between them. Caelorn felt something twist in his chest. Not quite hope, not quite despair. Something more complicated. The humans. The species the Council had quarantined for 300 years. The aggressive newcomers who had nearly sparked a war when they detonated a stellar mass to slow a Krinthax advance. An act of such reckless violence that 5 Council species had demanded they be declared a threat to civilized space. Caelorn himself had voted for the embargo. He remembered the debates. Humanity had appeared in the galaxy with salvaged FTL technology, patched together colony ships, and an unsettling tendency towards solutions that made older species recoil. They were too young, too volatile, too willing to gamble with extinction. They had fought 3 internal wars even while expanding into space. They had no global government for their first 2 centuries beyond their home world.
They were, by every Velothi measure, dangerously unstable.
What did they say? Kalorn asked.
Ferris brought up the holographic message. The figure that appeared was human, short by Velothi standards, bipedal, mammalian. Female, if Kalorn remembered their dimorphism correctly. She wore a simple gray uniform with minimal insignia. Her expression was calm, almost neutral.
This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Systems Alliance. We've received your distress call and confirmed your situation via long-range reconnaissance. We're mobilizing a response force, transmitting rendezvous coordinates now. Hold position if able. Help is coming.
The message ended. No grand speeches, no demands, no questions about why the mighty Velothi ascendancy was begging for aid from a species they had isolated for 3 centuries.
That's all? Kalorn asked.
That's all, sir.
Kalorn looked back at the debris field. Somewhere out there, the Krinthax Hive Armada was regrouping. Intelligence suggested they had already seeded 17 captured Velothi worlds with conversion spires. In 6 months, those worlds would be producing Krinthax bioships. In a year, they would be unrecognizable. Every citizen, every child, every living thing would be absorbed into the collective.
He had nothing left to lose. Pride was a luxury for those who had not watched their civilization burn.
Send them our tactical data, he said, and prepare the fleet to move to those coordinates.
Yes, High Consul. As Theris laughed, Kalorn remained at the viewport. He tried to remember what he knew of humanity. It was fragmentary, filtered through council reports and espionage data, most of it decades old. They had stopped the Krinthax once before, hadn't they? That stellar detonation. The Council had called it barbaric, a violation of the Accords on cosmic preservation. The humans had called it necessary. The Krinthax High Fleet advancing on the colony world of New Jakarta had been vaporized, along with the system's star. 12 billion humans had died when they evacuated too slowly. The humans had mourned, then rebuilt. They had not apologized. Kalorn wondered what kind of species chose fire over conquest, what kind of species mourned their dead and then did the same thing again if necessary. He supposed he would find out. The rendezvous coordinates were 3 days away at their damaged fleet's maximum speed. They traveled in silence, watching the long-range sensors for any sign of Krinthax pursuit. None came. The Hive fleet was occupied digesting its conquests, transforming Velothi civilization into raw biomass. On the 3rd day, they arrived at the coordinates, a nameless point in interstellar space, far from any gravity well or shipping lane. Kalorn had expected to find a human fleet waiting. Instead, there was a single station. It was not beautiful. Velothi stations were works of art, crystalline structures that caught and refracted light, singing harmonics that could be felt across a solar system. This human construction was purely functional, a rotating cylinder of gray metal and modular habitats studded with sensor arrays and docking ports. No aesthetic consideration, no wasted space. It reminded Kalorn of the emergency shelters they had built during the plague years, 4,000 cycles ago, when survival mattered more than elegance. "We're being hailed," Theris reported. Except the human who appeared on the view screen was not Admiral Chen. This one was male, older, with graying hair and deep lines around his eyes. He wore the same simple uniform.
High Consul Velthradis, I'm Captain Marcus Webb. Welcome to Firebase Jericho. We've prepared docking berths for your ships and medical facilities for your wounded. If you'll allow our traffic control to guide you in, we'll get your people settled. Kalorn's translator parsed the words, but he found himself studying the human's face. There was no triumph there, no smug satisfaction at seeing the proud Velothi brought low, just tiredness and something else, determination, perhaps.
"Captain Webb," Kalorn said carefully, "we are grateful for your aid, but I must ask, where is your fleet? The Krinthax will not stop. Our intelligence suggests a hive armada of over 15,000 capital ships is consolidating in occupied Velothi space."
Webb nodded. "We're aware. We've been tracking them for about 8 months now. The fleet's being mobilized. For now, let's get your people safe and fed. You've had a rough few months, Consul. Let us handle the immediate concerns."
It was not an answer, but Kalorn was too exhausted to press. Very well. The docking procedures were efficient. Kalorn watched as human technicians in EVA suits guided damaged Velothi ships into berths designed for vessels 3 times their size. Firebase Jericho, he realized, was enormous. How long had it been here? The intelligence reports he'd seen had never mentioned human deep space installations of this scale. He took a shuttle across to the station with Theris and his remaining senior staff, 4 officers who represented the last coherent command structure of the Velothi Ascendancy. The interior of the station was as utilitarian as the exterior. Gray corridors, bright lighting, clear signage in multiple languages, including Velothi script. The humans had prepared for them.
Captain Webb met them in what appeared to be a conference room. There was a table, chairs adjusted for Velothi physiology, and a large display screen on one wall. A human woman in a white coat stood nearby. A medical officer, Kalorn guessed.
"Please, sit," Webb said. "Dr. Okonkwo here will want to assess your medical needs. We've already begun processing your wounded. Our facilities are equipped for Velothi biochemistry. We pulled the specs from the old Council medical database."
Kalorn sat slowly. The chair adjusted automatically to his weight distribution. "You've gone to considerable trouble for a species that voted to quarantine yours."
Webb poured water from a pitcher into glasses, also adjusted for Velothi hands, and slid one across the table. That was politics. This is survival. We know what the Krinthax are. We know what they do to conquered populations. We wouldn't wish that on anyone.
"Even those who denied you council membership? Who called you dangerous and barbaric?"
For the first time, something flickered across Webb's face. It might have been amusement. "Consul, humans have been calling each other dangerous and barbaric for our entire history. We're used to it. We've also learned that when someone's drowning, you don't check if they liked you before you throw them a rope." Dr. Okonkwo stepped forward. "Hi, Consul. If you'll permit, I'd like to run some scans. We need to understand the toll this war has taken on your people, physiologically, psychologically. We can't help effectively if we don't know what we're dealing with." Kalorn looked at her. She was young, probably by human standards, but her eyes were steady and kind. He realized he had not seen kindness in a very long time. Pity, yes, fear, certainly, but not this calm, professional compassion.
"Do what you need to," he said quietly. Over the next several hours, Kalorn and his officers were processed through the human medical facilities. The scans were thorough but not invasive. The doctors asked questions about sleep, nutrition, stress responses. They treated injuries that Velothi field medics had been unable to address with depleted supplies. They were gentle with the wounded and patient with the traumatized.
Kalorn found himself in a private room afterward, staring at a wall display showing stars he did not recognize. A soft chime indicated a visitor. He turned to find Webb entering with 2 cups of something steaming.
"Tea," Webb said, offering 1 cup. We synthesized a blend compatible with Velothi biochemistry. Dr. Okonkwo thought you might appreciate something warm.
Kalorn accepted it. The scent was unfamiliar but pleasant. He sipped carefully. It was good. Thank you.
Webb sat in a chair across from him, cradling his own cup. You've lost a lot.
It was not a question. Kalorn found himself gripping the cup tighter. 37 worlds, roughly 40 billion citizens, 17 of our 23 defense fleets. The council halls on Veltharan are rubble. Our colonies are being converted into hive matter as we speak. The words came out flat, drained of emotion. He had said them so many times they had lost meaning. Numbers, abstractions.
And your family?
Webb asked quietly. Kalorn looked at him sharply. The human's face was neutral, but his eyes held something that might have been understanding. My daughter commanded the 3rd Fleet's vanguard. My son was on Veltharan when the bombardment began. My bonded mate died 400 years ago. Natural causes. He paused. I am the last of my line.
Webb nodded slowly. He did not offer platitudes. He did not say he was sorry. Instead, he said, "My wife was on Mars during the Phobos incident. Engineering team. They were trying to stabilize the orbital infrastructure when the reactor went critical. She got 200 people to the evacuation shuttles before the blast."
Kalorn met the human's eyes. She didn't make it out.
No, but 200 families got their loved ones back because of her. Webb took a sip of his tea. That was 30 years ago. The pain doesn't go away, Consul, but you learn to carry it, and you learn that the only way to honor them is to keep going, to make sure their sacrifice meant something.
They sat in silence for a while. Outside the viewport, the Velothi refugee ships were being resupplied. Human technicians swarmed over damaged hulls, repairing what they could. Kalorn watched them work with a precision that spoke of long practice.
"Why are you really here?" Kalorn asked finally. "Your species was quarantined. You could have used this as leverage, demanded concessions, forced the Council to recognize you. Instead, you're helping, without conditions."
Webb set down his cup. Because that's what you do when someone needs help. Because the Krinthax are everyone's problem. Because we remember what it's like to be alone and afraid and facing something bigger than ourselves. He leaned back. Humans have a long history of fighting losing battles, Consul. We've faced extinction more times than most species would believe. Ice ages, plagues, wars that should have ended us. We survived because we learned to adapt, to endure, to help each other, even when it seemed pointless. The Council called you dangerous, Kalorn said. After New Jakarta, after you destroyed a star to stop the Krindax. We are dangerous, Webb said simply. Every species capable of survival is dangerous when cornered. The difference is, we know it. We've spent 10,000 years learning to control it, channel it, point it at the things that actually threaten us. He met Kalorn's gaze. The Council species grew up in a relatively safe galaxy, Consul. You built your civilizations during a golden age of stability. Humanity grew up on a death world where everything, climate, predators, disease, was trying to kill us. We learned early that the universe doesn't care about fair. It only cares about who's willing to do what it takes to survive. Kalorn felt something cold settle in his chest. And you think that makes you better equipped for this war?
I think it makes us different. Not better, just tempered, forged by necessity. Webb stood. Get some rest, Consul. Tomorrow, I'd like to show you something. Then we'll talk about what comes next.
After Webb left, Kalorn sat alone with his thoughts. The tea had gone cold.
Outside, the stars turned in their ancient dance, indifferent as always. He wondered what his daughter would have made of these humans. She had been curious, always asking questions the Academy Masters found uncomfortable. She would have wanted to understand them.
He realized he did too.
The next morning, if the arbitrary ship time cycle could be called morning, Webb came to collect him. They walked through the station's corridors, passing human crew members who nodded respectfully but did not stare. Kalorn appreciated that. He had grown tired of being seen as a curiosity or a relic. They arrived at what appeared to be an operations center. The room was large, filled with display screens showing star charts, fleet positions, and data streams Kalorn could not immediately parse. Dozens of humans worked at consoles with quiet efficiency. One wall was dominated by a massive holographic display of the galaxy. "This is our strategic coordination hub," Webb explained. "We've been tracking the Krinthax expansion for about 5 years now, ever since they emerged from the galactic core."
Kalorn stared at the display. The Krinthax-controlled territory was marked in red. It was vast, hundreds of systems spreading like a bloodstain across the map. His own people's remaining territory was a shrinking blue archipelago at the edge.
5 years, he said. The Council only became aware of them 2 years ago.
"We know. We sent warnings. They were dismissed." Webb gestured, and the display shifted, rewinding the timeline. Kalorn watched as the red territory contracted, showing the Krinthax emergence point. "We've been monitoring their tactics, their reproduction rates, their resource consumption patterns. We know how they think, or rather, how their collective thinks."
"You've fought them before," Kalorn said. "New Jakarta."
"That was our first encounter. We lost 12 billion people and an entire colony sector. But we learned." Webb brought up another display. "The Krinthax are predictable once you understand their patterns. They prioritize biomass acquisition over strategic positioning. They don't value individual units. They will sacrifice billions of drones for marginal gains." "We know this," Kalorn said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "It did not help us stop them." Webb turned to him. "Because you fought them like you'd fight any other species, with honor, with rules of engagement, with the assumption that some things were too terrible to be used." He paused. "Humans don't have that luxury. We've seen too much, done too much. When we fight to win, whatever it takes." A chill ran down Kalorn's spine. "You destroyed a star!" "We did, and we'd do it again if we had to, because the alternative was worse. The Council condemned us for it, but those 12 billion deaths bought time for 20 other colonies to evacuate. 50 billion people survived, because we made a choice the Council couldn't stomach." Kalorn looked back at the display. The red territory pulsed with data markers showing hive installations, breeding worlds, fleet concentrations. It was overwhelming, unstoppable. And yet these humans spoke of fighting it as though victory was merely a matter of will and calculation. "How many ships do you have?" he asked quietly.
Webb was silent for a moment. Then he gestured and the display changed. New markers appeared across human space, thousands of them. Kalorn's breath caught.
"We've been building for 3 years," Webb said. "Every shipyard, every manufacturing station, every resource in the Terran Systems Alliance has been dedicated to preparing for this. We watched the Krinthax consume the Torvanai colonies. We watched them break the Sesharim defense lines. We watched the Council debate and argue and ultimately fragment. And we prepared." The numbers on the display were staggering. Not just thousands of ships, tens of thousands. Each marker represented fleet groups, battle wings, carrier formations. Kalorn's hands began to shake. This is more than the entire Council combined fleet at its height."
We're a young species, Consul. We don't have the old ways of doing things slowing us down. When we saw a threat, we mobilized. Every human world, every colony, every station. We've been at war economy status for 3 years. Our people accepted it because they understand what's at stake.
Kalorn turned to Webb. But you didn't act. You stayed in your own space. You let us fall.
Webb's expression hardened. We offered to help. 2 years ago, when the Krinthax first hit Velothi space, we sent a formal proposal to the Council. Joint operations, combined fleet actions, shared intelligence. We were willing to put aside the quarantine if it meant stopping the threat together. His voice was level, but Kalorn heard the anger beneath it. The Council rejected it, said they didn't need help from quarantined primitives, said the Velothi defense fleets were more than adequate.
Kalorn closed his eyes. He remembered that vote. He had abstained, unwilling to trust humanity, but aware that pride might be clouding judgment. It had not mattered. The majority had been overwhelming.
"So you waited," he said. "We waited, and we built. And when your distress call went out and no one else answered, we answered." Webb's voice softened. "We're not here for revenge, Council. We're not here to gloat. We're here because if we don't stop the Krinthax now, there won't be anyone left. Not us, not you, not anyone."
Kalorn opened his eyes and looked at the human. Really looked at him. Webb was tired. The lines around his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. But there was something else there, too. Certainty. A bone-deep conviction that made Kalorn's own exhausted resignation feel like cowardice.
"What do you need from us?"
Kalorn asked.
"Intelligence. Everything you know about the occupied worlds, hive installations, fleet patterns. Your people have been fighting them for 2 years. You've learned things we can use." Webb pulled up another display. "And we need you to trust us. What we're about to do, the Council won't like it, but it will work." Over the next week, Kalorn and his officers provided everything they had. Star charts marked with hive installations, tactical reports from hundreds of engagements, biological data on Krinthax conversion processes. The humans absorbed it all with a methodical efficiency that was both comforting and unsettling. Kalorn spent his days in meetings with human strategists who asked questions no one had thought to ask before. They wanted to know about Velothi cultural sites, historical archives, anything that might be targeted for symbolic rather than strategic reasons. They wanted to know about civilian evacuation patterns, infrastructure vulnerabilities, resource bottlenecks. They were preparing not just to fight, but to rebuild. His evenings he spent walking the station's observation decks, watching the stars and trying to process everything he was seeing. The humans moved with purpose. There was no panic, no desperation, just steady, relentless preparation. On the 8th day, Admiral Chen arrived. Kalorn was summoned to the main briefing room. When he entered, he found it filled with human officers, dozens of them, representing different fleet groups and command structures. At the head of the table sat a woman whose simple uniform could not disguise the authority she carried. Admiral Sarah Chen was smaller than most humans Kalorn had met, but when she stood to greet him, he felt the weight of her presence. Her eyes were dark and sharp, missing nothing. "High Consul," she said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "Thank you for your patience. I know you've been waiting for answers." Kalorn took her hand carefully. The grip was firm, but not aggressive. "Admiral, I confess I am uncertain what to expect."
That's fair. Chen gestured to a seat. "Please, let me show you what we've been planning."
The holographic display activated, showing the familiar map of Krinthax territory, but this time there were new elements. Kalorn leaned forward, trying to understand what he was seeing.
The Krinthax operate on a hub-and-spoke model, Chen began. Central hive worlds coordinate regional hive installations, which in turn control individual converted worlds. They use quantum-entangled communication nodes for coordination. Destroy the nodes, and the local hive fragments become disorganized.
"We know this," one of Kalorn's officers said, "but the nodes are buried deep in the hive installations, heavily defended. We lost entire fleets trying to take them out."
"Because you were trying to fight through to them," Chen said. "We're not going to fight through. We're going to go around."
The display shifted. Kalorn watched as human fleet markers appeared at the edges of Krinthax space, not advancing toward the territory, but spreading out in a wide arc. Simultaneous strike operations across 43 systems, Chen continued. We hit every major hub world and regional node at the same time. We're not trying to hold territory. We're trying to sever their coordination network. That would require... Kalorn's voice trailed off as he did the calculations. That would require hundreds of battle groups, precision timing across light years, the logistics alone.
Are complicated, Chen agreed, but manageable. We've been running simulations for 18 months. We have the ships, we have the coordination systems, we have the will. She looked at Kalorn. What we needed was the final piece of intelligence, the exact locations of the primary hub worlds. You gave us that.
Kalorn felt dizzy. When? Fleet mobilization began 4 days ago. All battle groups are moving into position now. We strike in 72 hours.
The room was silent. Kalorn looked around at the human faces. They were calm, focused. Not one showed doubt.
"You're committing everything," he said. "If this fails..."
"It won't fail," Chen said simply. "Failure isn't an option. We've planned for every contingency. We've war-gamed every scenario. We know the risks. We accept them." She pulled up another display. "High Consul, I won't lie to you. We're going to take casualties, probably heavy ones. The Krinthax will fight for every installation, but we're going to win, because we have to, because there is no alternative."
Kalorn looked at the battle plans spreading across the display. The complexity was staggering. Each strike force had primary targets, secondary objectives, fallback positions. Supply lines were mapped. Medical support was allocated. Evacuation routes for civilian populations on occupied worlds were marked. These humans had thought of everything. They had planned not just to fight, but to save as many lives as possible, to rebuild what the Krinthax had destroyed.
"What do you need from us?" he asked again. "Stay here. Stay safe. Let us handle this fight." Chen's expression softened. "You've lost enough, Consul. Let us give you something back."
Pride warred with pragmatism in Kalorn's chest. His people were warriors. They had defended the galaxy for millennia. To sit and watch while another species fought their battle felt like the final surrender of everything they had been.
But his people were also nearly extinct. What remained had to survive, had to rebuild, had to remember.
"Very well," he said quietly. "We will trust you." The next 72 hours were the longest of Kalorn's life. The humans went about their preparations with calm efficiency, but the tension was palpable. Firebase Jericho became a hub of activity as final supplies were loaded, last-minute intelligence updates distributed, and fleet commanders conducted final briefings. Kalorn watched from the observation deck as human ships began departing. They left in waves, carrier groups, battleship formations, destroyer squadrons. Each group jumped to FTL with precision timing, vanishing into the dark in flares of exotic radiation.
He counted them.
Stopped counting. Started again. The numbers were absurd. No species could field this many ships. No economy could support this scale of mobilization. And yet the ships kept coming, kept leaving, an endless tide of human steel and determination.
Webb found him there on the final evening before the attack.
"Can't sleep?" the captain asked.
Would you? Webb smiled faintly. No, I never do before an operation. He stood beside Kalorn, looking out at the stars. My daughter is out there, commander of the carrier Indomitable, 3rd Fleet, Strike Group 7.
Kalorn glanced at him. "You let her go?"
I don't let her do anything. She's a grown woman and a damn fine officer. Better than I was at her age. Webb's voice was proud, but Kalorn heard the fear beneath it. But yes, she's out there, along with thousands of other sons and daughters and parents and loved ones. That's what makes a strong consul. We don't send others to fight while we stay safe. We all go, together.
"You could lose her," Kalorn said. "Like I lost mine."
I could, but she'd never forgive me if I tried to keep her safe while others fought. And I'd never forgive myself if I valued her life over the billions depending on us. Webb was quiet for a moment. That's the burden of command, isn't it? Loving people and still sending them into danger.
They stood in silence, watching the last of the fleet depart.
"When this is over," Kalorn said slowly, "when the council reconvenes, they will have to acknowledge what you've done, who you are. The quarantine will end."
Maybe. Or maybe they'll find new reasons to fear us. Doesn't matter. Webb turned to him. "We're not doing this for recognition, Consul. We're doing it because it's right, because we can, because we remember what it's like to be alone and afraid, and we refuse to let anyone else feel that way if we can prevent it."
The attack began at 0400 station time. Kalorn was in the operations center, surrounded by human officers monitoring data streams from across the combat zone. Admiral Chen stood at the center of it all, calm as still water.
The first reports came in minutes after the synchronized FTL drops. 43 systems, hundreds of battle groups, all arriving simultaneously at the edges of Krinthax-controlled space.
Contact with Strike Group 1. Engaging defenses around hub world Sigma. Strike Group 12 reporting successful insertion, beginning assault on regional node Alpha 7. 3rd Fleet has cleared the outer defense perimeter. Moving to primary target.
The reports cascaded in. Kalorn watched the tactical displays update in real time. Human ships were engaging Krinthax hive fleets across dozens of systems. The scale was incomprehensible. Each individual battle would have been considered a major engagement. Together, they represented the largest military operation Kalorn had ever witnessed.
And the humans were winning.
Not easily. The casualty reports began coming in, ships destroyed, battle groups taking heavy damage, calls for medical support, reinforcement, extraction. But the human advance did not slow. For every ship lost, 2 more pressed forward. For every setback, there was a contingency plan already in motion.
Strike Group 7 has breached Hub World Sigma's core defenses, deploying kinetic penetrators.
On the display, Kalorn watched as a human battle group unleashed weapons that made Valathi plasma lances look gentle. Massive kinetic rounds moving at relativistic speeds slammed into the hive installation's shields, shattering them through brute force. Secondary waves of missiles followed, burrowing deep into the structure before detonating.
The hub world's quantum communication node went dark. Node Sigma destroyed, an officer reported. Regional hive coordination disrupted, detecting fragmentation in local Krinthax fleet cohesion.
Chen nodded. Move to Phase 2. Begin liberation operations on occupied worlds in Sigma Sector. Kalorn stared at the display. Liberation operations. The humans were not just destroying the hive installations, they were saving the populations on occupied worlds, extracting survivors before the conversion processes became irreversible. "Admiral," he said, "those worlds, many of them are Velothi, our people." Chen looked at him. "I know, Consul. We're bringing them home." Over the next 18 hours, Kalorn watched the impossible unfold. One by one, the Krinthax hub worlds fell. The hive coordination network shattered. Without central direction, the regional hive installations became isolated, predictable, vulnerable. Human fleets moved with surgical precision, cutting off supply lines, destroying conversion facilities, evacuating populations. They did not try to hold the territory. That would come later. For now, they focused on destroying the Krinthax ability to coordinate and reproduce. The Krinthax fought with the desperation of a dying organism. They threw everything at the human fleets. Suicide waves of bioships, desperate counterattacks, last-ditch attempts to salvage their installations. But the humans had planned for all of it. For every Krinthax tactic, there was a human counter-tactic already prepared. Kalorn found himself thinking of Webb's words, "We're dangerous when cornered." But it was not humanity that was cornered now. It was the Krinthax, and they were learning what happened when they threatened a species that had survived everything Earth had thrown at it. On the second day, a priority message came through from Strike Group 7, Webb's daughter. "This is Commander Webb of the Indomitable. We've secured Hub World Delta and begun evacuation operations. Priority 1, we've located survivors on the surface, multiple species, including Velothi, thousands of them, held in pre-conversion containment, requesting immediate medical support and transport." Kalorn's chest tightened. "Which world?" An officer checked the data. "Hub World Delta. Council. That's Velshara, one of your garden worlds." Velshara. Kalorn had visited it once, centuries ago. A world of crystalline forests and singing valleys, home to 12 billion Velothi. It had fallen 4 months ago. He had thought everyone there was lost. "How many survivors?" he managed. The officer listened to the incoming data. Early estimates, approximately 800,000, multiple species. The Krinthax were stockpiling biomass for a major conversion event. We got there first. 800,000. It was a fraction of what had been lost, but it was 800,000 lives that would have been erased from existence if not for these humans and their impossible operation. "Send everything they need," Chen ordered. "Medical ships, transports, supplies. I want those people safe and on their way to Firebase Jericho within 12 hours. Similar reports came in from other systems. Survivors found, populations rescued, worlds liberated. The numbers grew, millions, then tens of millions. Not all of them Velothi. The Krinthax had consumed dozens of species. The humans were saving them all. On the third day, the last major hub world fell. The Krinthax coordination network was completely shattered. What remained were isolated hive installations, cut off from central command, operating on base instinct and local resources. Chen addressed the operations center. "Phase 3 begins now. All fleet groups transition to systematic elimination of remaining hive installations. Rules of engagement remain unchanged. Minimize civilian casualties. Preserve infrastructure where possible. Prioritize evacuation over destruction." She looked around the room. "We've broken them. Now we finish this.
For everyone they killed, for everyone they would have killed, for the galaxy we're going to rebuild. The operation continued for another week. Kalorn watched as human fleets methodically dismantled what remained of the Krinthax presence in this region of space. It was not vengeance, it was necessity. The Krinthax could not be negotiated with, could not be contained. They had to be eliminated, completely and finally. But even in destruction, the humans showed restraint. They gave the Krinthax drones chances to flee. They did not pursue hive ships that retreated toward the galactic core. They focused on protecting the vulnerable, preserving what could be preserved. Kalorn found himself in the observation deck when the first refugee ships began arriving at Firebase Jericho. He watched as transport after transport docked, disgorging survivors, Valathi, Torvani, Sesharum, species he did not immediately recognize, all of them exhausted, traumatized, but alive. Human medical teams met each ship, providing care with the same calm efficiency they brought to everything. No one was turned away. No one was deemed too damaged or too costly to save. Every life mattered.
The Scythress found him there. The young ensign looked different now. Her crest feathers had regained some color. Her scales gleamed. She had hope again.
"High Council," she said softly, "you should come to the medical bay. There's someone you need to see."
Kalorn followed her through the station's corridors. The medical bay was crowded with survivors receiving treatment. Human doctors moved among them, treating injuries, providing comfort, coordinating care with a precision that spoke of long preparation.
Theris led him to a private room. Inside, on a medical bed, was a young Valathi male. His scales were dull from malnutrition, and his limbs showed signs of restraint damage, but he was breathing, alive.
Kalorn's legs nearly gave out. Corvin!
His son opened his eyes. They were clouded with pain and medication, but they focused on Kalorn's face. "Father?" Kalorn moved to the bedside, taking his son's hand with trembling fingers. I thought you were lost when Velfarin fell." "Captured," Corvin said weakly. "Held for conversion. They were going to, but the humans came. They broke through the defenses. They got us out." His grip tightened. "They saved us, Father. When everyone else had abandoned us, the humans came."
Dr. Okonkwo appeared at Kalorn's side. "He's going to be okay, Consul. Physically, at least. The psychological trauma will take time to heal, but he's strong. He'll recover."
Kalorn could not speak. He stood there, holding his son's hand, feeling the weight of the last months finally catch up to him. He had prepared himself to be the last of his line, to watch his people fade into history. And now, through the intervention of a species his people had dismissed and quarantined, there was a future again.
Admiral Chen found him later, after he had spent hours with Corvin, watching him sleep and convincing himself this was real.
"High Consul," she said quietly, "I'm glad we found him. We found many, not all, but many."
Kalorn turned to her, this small human woman who commanded fleets and saved civilizations. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you do this? Risk so much for people who rejected you?"
Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because someone once helped us when we needed it most. Back on Earth, long before we reached the stars, humans nearly destroyed ourselves. Wars, environmental collapse, pandemics, we came so close to extinction. We survived because people chose to help instead of abandon, because they chose unity over division.
because they understood that saving others is how you save yourself.
She looked out the viewport at the refugee ships still arriving. We learned hard lessons, Consul. We learned that strength without compassion is just brutality, that survival means nothing if you lose your humanity in the process, that the only thing that truly matters is what you do when someone calls for help.
Kalorn felt something break inside him. The last remnants of the pride and certainty that had defined Velothi civilization for millennia. They had thought themselves superior, enlightened, the guardians of galactic order. They had dismissed humanity as primitive and dangerous.
They had been so terribly wrong. "We called," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and no one answered. No one except you."
"We'll always answer," Chen said simply. "That's what it means to be human. We endure, we adapt, and we never leave anyone behind if we can help it." Over the following weeks, the scale of the human victory became clear. The Krinthax had been driven back to the galactic core, their expansion halted, their coordination shattered. It would be centuries before they could pose a threat again, if ever. The occupied worlds were being reclaimed, rebuilt, resettled. The Galactic Council reconvened, those species that remained. The Velothi sent Kalorn as their representative. He walked into the chamber where he had once voted to quarantine humanity and faced the assembled delegates. "I stand before you," he said, "as the representative of a people who were too proud to accept help when it was offered, who watched our civilization burn rather than trust those we had deemed unworthy, who sent a distress call into the void expecting silence and received salvation instead." He looked around the chamber. Many seats were empty. Many species had fallen or retreated into isolation. But those who remained listened.
Humanity answered our call when no one else would. They risked everything to save us. They asked for nothing in return. They demonstrated courage, compassion, and capability that shames our ancient pride. He paused. "I move that the quarantine be lifted immediately, that humanity be granted full council status, that we acknowledge what we should have seen from the beginning, that they are not a danger to galactic civilization, they are its future." The vote was unanimous. Later, on Firebase Jericho, Kalorn stood with Admiral Chen, watching as the first joint Velothi-human patrol departed. His son Corvin was aboard one of the ships, having requested assignment to the reconstruction efforts. A new generation learning from humanity what the old generation had refused to see. "The Council wants you to know," Kalorn said, "that you have our gratitude, our friendship. Whatever you need, we will provide. It is the least we can do." Chen smiled. "What we need, Consul, is what we've always needed. Partners, allies, friends who will stand with us when the next crisis comes, because it will come. The universe always finds new ways to test us." "And when it does," Kalorn said, "we will face it together. Not as superior and inferior, but as equals, as friends." They stood together, human and Velothi, watching the ships depart into a future neither could fully predict. But for the first time and longer than Kalorn could remember, he felt hope. The stars did not weep. They burned in silence, patient and eternal, watching as old empires learned humility and young species proved their worth. They witnessed the first words of new friendships forged in fire, and the quiet promise that no call for help would go unanswered. The galaxy turned, indifferent to pride or prejudice, marking time in the slow dance of light and gravity that predates thought itself. But within that vast indifference, in the spaces between stars, something had changed. Humanity had answered the call, and in doing so, they had reminded the ancient species of the galaxy what they had forgotten. That true strength lies not in standing above others, but in standing beside them. That civilization is measured not by how high you rise, but by how many you lift with you. That the greatest power any species can possess is the simple, terrible, beautiful choice to help when help is needed.
No one had answered their call until Earth did, and that made all the difference.